and small hills. Tough landscape for cavalry to maneuver in at speed. Pataki deliberately set up his camp just outside the town, using both natural and man-made barriers to turn the area into a fortress. To the west, dense forests blocked any large-scale flanking movement. To the east, wide-open terrain offered no cover for the Tatars, neutralizing their greatest strength in fast, sweeping maneuvers. But the real secret lay in the middle ground ponds, rivers, and earthen levees near the old castle, which Pataki cleverly integrated into his defensive system. Behind the main line, the Polish army built what looked like a moving fortress. The Tabor, it was a field fortification made of wagons chained together wheel to wheel, usually in a square, circle, or polygon, forming an improvised wall of wood and iron. Once locked in place, those wagons became a barrier that cavalry couldn't penetrate. Inside this wooden fortress, infantry and artillery found safety from arrows and charging horsemen. Soldiers could fire muskets and cannons from behind cover, protected from the composite bow volleys that had terrorized European armies for centuries. The Poles preferred light artillery pieces, small enough to maneuver quickly between wagon gaps, but accurate enough and powerful enough to smash into charging horsemen before they ever reached the defensive line. When the Tatars came within sight, musketeers took up firing positions between wagon gaps, while others stood ready with sabers, axes, and repair tools. The moment the Tatars came within effective range, the Polish guns opened up, a wall of smoke and thunder rolling across the plains that completely changed the tactical equation. This is where the balance of power completely flipped in Poland's favor. The Tatars' composite bows were lethal weapons in skilled hands, but their effective range was only about 150 meters. The Poles' muskets and light cannons could strike from twice that distance, 300 meters or more. The Tabor wagon fortress forced the Tatars to fight outside their comfort zone far enough back to stay alive, but too far away to inflict real damage with their arrows. Even contemporary observers noticed how devastatingly effective this setup was. The French engineer Guillaume Levasseur de Beauplan, who spent years studying warfare in Eastern Europe, wrote that even a handful of Cossacks inside a Tabor could hold off thousands of Tatars simply because the raiders could never get close enough to make their arrows count. This kind of defensive setup wasn't new for the Poles. They had used Tabor tactics before, famously under King Jan Sobieski at Podhajce in 1667, yes? The same location 31 years earlier when they faced Cossack Tatar forces. But the 1698 battle was different. It was a modernized, professionalized version of that same strategy with more firepower, better coordination, and a more disciplined army to pull it off. It's early September, 1698. The Polish army, stretched thin and exhausted from marching, is winding its way southeast from the town of Monasterzyska. The whole column stretches almost 9 kilometers long. That's roughly 5.5 miles. Imagine a single line of soldiers, horses, supply wagons, and artillery pieces trailing off as far as the eye can see across the rolling frontier landscape. A massive Tatar force, part of the Crimean Khanate's final raiding army. 30,000 strong is shadowing them, probing for weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And on September 8th, That moment arrives. A second Tatar column, large and fast, swings around the Polish flank and slams into the rear of the marching line, exactly where an army is most vulnerable, where supply wagons are concentrated and infantry are strung out without proper defensive formations. Normally, that's the kind of move that would tear a marching force apart through panic and confusion. But the Polish commanders had studied Tatar tactics for decades. They knew this was the raiders' favorite trick: hit the rear, cause chaos, capture the supply train, take prisoners, and vanish before the main force could respond. So instead of panicking, near a small village called Wierzbów, the Poles halt the column and immediately order a tabor to be formed. Officers shout commands. Wagons are wheeled into position with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, wheels are chained together, creating an improvised fortress of wood and steel. Artillery pieces are positioned in the gaps. Infantry take up firing positions. The entire vulnerable column transforms into a hedgehog of muskets and cannons. This wagon fortress, combined with well-placed artillery and the natural terrain around Wierzbów, stops the Tatar assault cold. Their cavalry, normally unstoppable on open ground through speed and mobility, suddenly find themselves facing walls of wood backed by concentrated firepower. Instead of chaos and fleeing soldiers, they meet disciplined volleys of musket fire. Instead of panic, they meet preparation. The Tatars try multiple times to break through, riding in crescent formations, firing arrows in thick volleys that darken the sky. But the Polish guns answer with cannonballs that tear through cavalry ranks and musket volleys that drop horses mid-stride. The Poles not only hold their ground at Wierzbów, but they also successfully link up with the main defensive force waiting at Podhajy just a few miles away. Those light horsemen who usually lived and died by quick raids and encirclement tactics are now forced into frontal assaults, something their army was never designed to do. Then comes September 9th, the main battle. Crimean Khan Kaplan Jure decides to launch his full attack against the fortified Polish camp at Podhajys. He focuses on what appears to be a weak point, a dam near the old castle. One of the few spots where his troops can cross the river quickly without being channeled into killing zones. The logic is tactically sound. Break through there and the whole Polish defensive position could collapse. At first, sheer numbers seem to work. Waves of Tatar riders push forward with suicidal courage, and some Polish defenders are forced to pull back from their forward positions. For a few terrifying minutes, it looks like the dam might fall. But just as the Tatars start to gain ground and momentum, the Polish artillery opens up. Cannons from the castle walls and the nearby entrenchments start pounding the attackers with devastating accuracy. Shot after shot, exploding among the packed Tatar ranks, sending bodies flying, breaking their formation, and throwing horses into panic. Cannonballs don't just kill, they terrorize, creating psychological shock that's worth more than the physical casualties. Once the Tatar attack starts to lose coherent shape under the artillery barrage, the Polish cavalry, led by Michał Potocki, moves in for the counterattack. This isn't the classic Polish cavalry charge of the old days, with shining winged hussars thundering across open fields in massive formations. By 1698, their role had evolved into something more calculated. They were the reserve hammer. waiting patiently for just the right moment to strike when the enemy was disrupted and vulnerable. Potaki's cavalry, likely a mix of Panzerni armored lancers and some remaining hussars, charges straight into the disorganized Tatar front, exploiting the gaps created by artillery fire. The result, the Tatars are forced to retreat with heavy casualties, leaving bodies scattered across the dam approach. But Kaplan Girai isn't done. He shifts tactics immediately. Instead of another frontal push against the strongest point, he sends his men to flank the Polish position, crossing the Koropiec River to attack the Old Town sector from a different angle. Here, the defenders are mainly foreign-style musketeers, trained professionals who fight with disciplined volleys rather than individual heroics. When the Tatars rush forward across the river, they're met with sheets of musket fire delivered in coordinated volleys. One rank firing while the next reloads, a relentless rhythm of smoke, thunder, and death that no amount of courage can overcome. And once again, Polish cavalry moves in to counterattack at the perfect moment, driving the Tatars back across the river in disorder. Still, the battle isn't over. The most dangerous moment comes next. A sudden, unexpected Tatar strike on the Polish supply camp behind the main defensive lines. The Tatars somehow break through the perimeter defenses and catch the camp guards off guard. For a few terrifying minutes, it looks like the whole army might collapse from losing its ammunition, food, and medical supplies. Soldiers are shouting. Smoke is rising from burning tents, and panic begins to spread through the rear areas. But here's where the Tatars make a critical, catastrophic mistake, one that reveals the deeper structural flaw in their entire military system. Instead of pressing the attack immediately and smashing through to attack the main Polish force from behind, which would have been devastating, many Tatar fighters break formation and begin looting the supply camp. Their army was built around the Jazir system, a raiding economy based on capturing slaves and plunder for immediate economic gain. That meant the moment riches appeared, tactical discipline went out the window. What could have been a decisive breakthrough turns into chaos as Tatars grab food, weapons, valuables, and begin killing civilians and camp followers rather than maintaining military pressure. While the Tatars are busy looting and taking individual captives, the Poles regroup. Officers rally their scattered men. Artillery is hastily repositioned, and infantry units rush back from the main lines. The counterattack begins with brutal efficiency. After savage close-quarters fighting, the Tatars are driven out of the camp, suffering heavy losses in the confused retreat. By now, their momentum is completely gone, their tactical advantage wasted, their morale shattered by repeated failures. Kaplan Girai, seeing that all major assaults have failed and his army is taking unsustainable casualties, finally orders a general withdrawal the next day. Tatar losses were likely several thousand killed and wounded. Polish casualties remained under 700. The raid had failed completely. No massive slave haul. No negotiating leverage for the peace treaty. Just losses and humiliation. 4 months later, the Treaty of Karlowitz was signed. Poland regained Podolia, and the age of Tatar slave raids ended permanently. Subscribe to Great History for more battles where defensive modernization and tactical discipline defeated mobile raiding warfare through firepower superiority.